Hello, welcome to Framework, the official podcast of dead wives and varying temporal strata. We are here today to wrap up our Nolan-oscopy, we being myself, Al Schwartz, and my partner, John Bernard.
Yep, me. That's right.
All right, we are going to look over the 11-film filmography, probably a better way of phrasing that, of Christopher Nolan. Right now, try and provide some rankings of them. It's gonna be hard to do definitively, however, because I'm realizing now you and I have wildly different lists here than I thought we. I thought we would be mostly on the same page. I didn't feel like we were really at odds that much throughout the Nolan-oscopy.
No, but I think that as we get into the granular details of it, it'll be like, yeah, I guess we were a little different on that, but I don't know. I have most of these pretty close. Is the thing. Like it's a close collection of titles for like 1 through 8, and then it falls off a bit. But like that, I think these are all. I mean, they're all very similarly Christopher Nolan films. They have the distinct flavor and texture of him every time, and that as a result, end up feeling of a piece.
For me, the top spots were relatively easy to rank there, but there's kind of a soupy middle where from about like 4 to 7 or 8, kind of like, these I could shuffle these around some. It depends what you're doing. Like the one thing that's going to come up here, I think, is when you're ranking movies, which is always an arbitrary, exercise, as we have been over before. You run into the question of the greatest, quote unquote, greatest versus your favorite. And
right.
With Nolan, I found that was the thing here, is that he is as I learned about myself through this process, he is an undeniably great filmmaker that I don't enjoy that much. And so he has some undeniably great films that don't have really much rewatchability for me. And so how do I rate that against 1 or 2 movies that I think are flawed but more rewatchable?
I tend to lean towards my personal preference in cases like this. Just I think it's more interesting than being like, well, you got to give it to Dunkirk, even though it's a film that doesn't really move me too much. It's obviously great, but it's also kind of not my movie.
That's one, speaking of the soupy middle, Dunkirk is like the only one we agreed on 2 of films.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Our number, we both have the same number 1, and we both put Dunkirk square in the middle.
Yeah, that's about right. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I'm actually with you in how I feel about Nolan, though. Like this is, and I think I kind of felt this way going in. If anything, watching all these movies again kind of reminded me what a strong craftsman he is, and how he doesn't really make bad movies most of the time. Like he's working at a very high level, and it may just not be my personal preference. It's not my cup of tea necessarily, but I can't deny these are really good, and I like watching them. They're all really good, or enough of them are that you can clearly say he's a great filmmaker. Yeah.
Well, there's some of them I think that are really good, but I do not like watching them that much, which we'll get to. Let's first of all, let's dispense with following, which is at the bottom of both our lists. I had it dead last. You have 1 below it.
I do,
but following, we did a whole episode on it, which is probably as much attention as anyone has ever paid to following since its release. It is a very nascent Nolan movie. It's him as I don't think he's actually a film student, but it feels a bit like a student film. You can see some Nolan stuff there that is not fully developed, but it is a perfectly okay noir exercise.
Student filmy kind of thing. It's, there's no reason for following to exist out there. Well, no, that's not true. The reason to watch following is because you're interested in Christopher Nolan and you want to see early Nolan, and like there's no reason outside of this is part of the Nolan filmography to really be interested in following, and it is rewarding in that way. I think the only reason I have this not dead last is because it's an hour long, and that's nice. It's a short thing that you just fly through. Obviously this is a sketch. This is like the thing he did before he started making movies. Almost is how it feels, even though it is technically a movie. It's fine if you're very into Nolan. I mean, it's interesting to see him it's sort of a pupa state, just kind of
Yeah,
trying stuff out and getting ready for the next thing. In that sense, he is like, oh well, clearly he is fully formed already. But as you even just going to his next film, Memento, it becomes very clear like he took a huge step up. He's this is him figuring out the fundamentals, and in that sense, it's fine. There's a really good performance in it. It's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the strangest thing about it. It's got one like really good performance that kind of blows away the rest of the cast, and it's by a non-actor who like he met in
Yeah.
graduate school and who never acted again, as far as I know. I could tell. Um, so yeah, interesting curio, but whatever. There's another 30 minutes of us talking about following if you really want more info on that. But let's move along.
Right.
Actually, you know what? I lied. We had one other movie where we both put The Dark Knight Rises in ninth place.
Interesting.
Um,
Hmm.
our second to last place is where we have the biggest difference there, but we'll get to those
Oh,
later on.
okay.
Uh, but The Dark Knight Rises we both placed pretty low. I think it's undeniably flawed, and
Yeah.
undeniably the weakest of his Batman trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and as you alluded to with following there, also just so long.
This is a problem for him. This is an issue. The length of his films. I mean, we complain about this a lot. I feel like more. I think this bothers me and you more than most people. At least most people listening to this podcast who know about movies. We don't like long movies. It has to be a damn good reason for your movie to be long. And Dark Knight Rises is there's no good reason. I mean, it's not quite as extreme as the Batman.
Yeah, but the Batman has similar issues where it's not like it's not just pure length. It's also the feeling of repetitiveness,
Yeah.
where in the Batman it feels like we're going through the same paces a lot. We're visiting the same locations repeatedly with not that broad of a cast even. So it feels like we're going through the same paces quite a bit there. And with Dark Knight Rises, it's repeating that Batman sort of like gets his mojo back twice throughout the course of this movie.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, I just also a little bit of repetitiveness is that Bane, like as much as he is not a clone of the Joker, and that's like a credit to the movie, the way his plot sort of unfolds feels sort of reminiscent of how the Joker stuff like the was paced out. Uh,
Yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, that there is. I mean, I think that when you make the Dark Knight, you kind of have to top it, or you have
yeah,
to attempt to top it. I guess you don't really. Like there probably would have been a closer to home thing that kind of played a little bit more directly into the Bruce Wayne character. That I mean, they're going for that a little bit and bring back the League of Shadows. But I think a tighter focus would have helped him in this case because they have to make this thing the biggest finale, the biggest conclusion. And I wonder how much of this is studio driven and or whatever. But it doesn't. It does not reach the level of Dark Knight, not even close. And they're trying desperately to get there.
yeah, they're
And
trying to outdo
yeah,
it through sheer scope.
yeah, uh-huh,
uh, and the length plays into that too. It's
yeah.
bigger and longer and more grandiose. And my main gripe with the movie though is that I think it overshoots that mark so much that the whole last hour of this does not work for me because it feels like it's shot right past a Batman problem and into like like a problem on the level of the war in Ukraine now. Like the whole world is now this is our focus. There's nobody else can deal with anything else until we kind of have this taken care
Hmm.
of. And it that so that's my knock on it. On top of just sheer length, like I said, we're a little more sensitive to that. I think has to be affected somewhat by how we both have babies at home now, and so
Maybe
carving
I
out
always thought this was long though. This is always
I did feel that back in the theater as well, actually. So I mean, it's
yeah,
not just that, but it has only gotten harder to carve out 3 hours at a time to sit with one thing.
yeah,
Um,
exacerbated.
we're talking about the rewatchability issue. Like there are sequences of Dark Knight Rises I find rewatchable, but I cannot imagine ever sitting down to do a full serving, like one sitting of this movie.
I've done it too often now because it follows two movies I love. So I'm just like, well, I'm gonna finish the trilogy, and then I'm like, oh
Mhm.
right, this one, because and it has Bane, and Bane is great. Bane's so much fun, you know. So you remember the high points of this, and then when you deal with it on its own terms, it's kind of like it's actually a bit of a letting the air out of the balloon, really. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, Dark Knight ends on such a what's next moment that and you want it to be a complete trilogy and a complete statement. In the way that Lord of the Rings is, or something that really aspires to be like, the three volumes of the Batman saga, and it's a disappointment in those terms, and
It's a
you know,
disappointment, especially in that it does it like Dark Knight seems to set up a particular dynamic going forward, and then Rises just does not follow up on that. Like
yeah.
it says actually he just retired. He just gave up on that. So uh, you know now we're gonna kind of start from scratch, which is maybe part of getting away from trying to get out of the shadow of Ledger and his death. But I don't think it does the movie any favors, really. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows what this film would have been with Ledger still alive? I mean, to me that's like a big question mark, kind of like what could have been one of those lost movies in a sense. I mean, like, they didn't even get started on it, obviously, but clearly, he would have come back. They would have had a whole plot that was, I don't know, would it involve Bane still? Would it have been, juggling all these things? They probably could have pulled that off.
Hmm.
Uh, him not being in this,
Hard to
anyway,
speculate. I mean,
yeah. Hmm.
but okay, so that's the Dark Knight Rises. We'll
Sure.
return to Batman as we move
Oh,
along here.
of course. When do we never talk about Batman? It's
Let's
yeah.
next though. Let's start off at Dunkirk. That I said
Oh,
we
okay.
both put that dead center with five ahead, five behind it.
Hmm.
It is sort of one of those.
We're jumping around here, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the way I'm structuring this is we both we both ranked things higher than this. So
Sure.
it's a complicated system where uh, this is the one with like the worst that has the lowest ceiling.
Okay. Hmm.
Nobody ranked us higher than six, and every other movie, one of us ranked higher than six.
Right.
So that's how we're going to do it. Anyway, so Dunkirk is a sort of maybe the quintessential like example of what we were talking about before, like undeniably great film that sort of just flows off uh, the back of my mind once it's over, and
Yeah.
it does not come up in conversation much. I'd never had an urge to revisit it until we were doing this, even though it was a pretty powerful theatrical experience, as I recall. Um, and it works when it's on, and then it just when it's over, it's like part of it's you don't know anybody's name. Uh,
Hmm.
there's not the way that the different temporal strata are spliced together means you don't really remember the sequence of like when anything happens before or after this, and you I kind of remember like some pretty cool World War II dogfights and like how horrible it must be to be inside a sinking battleship.
Yeah. I mean, it's a movie of moments and experiences, and kind of there's a verite quality to it, of just like, you're just thrown into the damn thing, and this is how it must have felt, and without anything really to tether you to that narratively. Just a basic familiarity of what Dunkirk is and what the premise of the film is. You walk in with that, you're going to leave with that. Basically, it is all about moments, and I appreciate this in a sense, and it almost works non-narratively, like
Mhm.
as an art film, I would say, and it's
Yeah.
kind of amazing he made this such a gigantic global hit, considering it has none of the concessions that you usually would expect to see in a film of this budget, targeted at this size of an audience. And yet, you know, uh, I wish I could credit it more for that, because at the end of the day, it's just not a film that has much sway on me. It's not in my mind ever. And when it comes to war movies, we talk about this in the episode. The ones that really stick with me are the ones where I'm emotionally connected to it, and this one almost doesn't want you to do that.
It's interesting you mentioned this being a big hit, and you have to remind me of that. I think you probably did in the episode we did too. That I
Huge.
forget that this was an enormous hit. It almost feels like his Avatar in a way, uh, where I mean it's the exact opposite in that Avatar is trying to be the biggest four quadrant blockbuster it possibly can be, and accessible. To tell this sort of uh, uber myth of all the every white savior trope and epic movie thing you can in a sci-fi package. Whereas this is Nolan's version, which is just a completely unsentimental war film. Um, I mean, I suppose it's got with the Ryland stuff, it's got a little
Yeah,
bit of
subtle.
reserved British,
Hmm.
sentiment, but in a way, it's a bit bloodless. Like even for as many people as die in this, and as horrifying as some of those are, it's by drowning, which is a bloodlessly horrifying death. Um, but it is also like apparently this huge hit that has feels like it's left very little cultural impact. The way that people talk about Avatar being the biggest movie ever that nobody talked about for like 8 or 10 years um, afterwards.
Well, I mean, I think like Avatar, what a big deal part of what the sell of Dunkirk is that is a cinematic experience. That you
Mm.
go to a movie theater and you have the experience of watching Dunkirk probably in the biggest screen with the biggest sound system available, and that is the transporting version of it. That's the one that that makes it kind of great, and you really see it at its absolute peak. And without that, it's, I mean, we talked about this too. It's like Gravity or any of those films
Yep.
where the medium that you're experiencing in is sort of the point. And I don't know. I feel like this is maybe less true of Dunkirk than some of those, but at the same time, it's sort of the number one thing about it. It is sort of the point of Dunkirk is to really be overwhelmed and drawn into it. And I don't know, it loses something at home. There's just no denying it. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, I would. Would you go see this again if it was released as like an IMAX? I mean, it's a tough question now because I wouldn't, because I don't have the time because that
Yeah. Exactly.
to watch a movie I just watched. But down the line maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I would
I
actually.
don't. I don't think so. Yeah. 'Cause it doesn't really have like the one bravura sequence that I'm like, oh, I want to go back and see that sequence in IMAX
Hmm.
again. The way even like our next film we're talking about is Tenet, and that's
Ah.
got those sequences that I'm like, oh, I wish I could have seen that on the big screen, and I might be tempted to go see it on the big screen because I didn't get to before. I've only seen it at home.
Hmm.
But that's one. So that was your bottom of the barrel. You ranked that
Number
dead
11.
last.
Number 11. Yeah. Hmm.
I ranked it number 5.
Damn.
Uh, uh,
Jeez. Ugh. Okay.
this is the one for me that just completely embodies the thing of okay, this for whereas most of Nolan's films, like a Dunkirk, I could be like, that is a completely successful exercise. I have to give it full points on execution, and points for difficulty as well. Like Nolan, that if there's one thing you have to give it to him on, he challenges himself. Even if he does it like he sets some of the same challenges for himself repeatedly with
Hmm.
the timeline stuff and all that, but he doesn't make it easy on himself. I guess he had to make his war movie interesting enough to hold his attention. He had to like put that stuff into it. Tenet, as we discussed in the episode, is laden down with all that stuff, and I think the time travel stuff is remarkable for how like the main conceit of the movie adds like nothing of value to it to me. It holds it back in some
Yep.
ways,
Yep.
but just the action filmmaking is so good, and the core performances I enjoy so much that it's the one that, despite being a worse movie, I can tell on an objective level than a Memento or an Inception or a Dunkirk, I might rather revisit it than any of those.
Uh, um, no, no, none of that. It's infuriating to me, this movie.
Yeah.
Rewatching it helped. It moved up in my estimation. After I saw it the first time, I was like, "Fuck that," and the second time, I was like, "Well, clearly there are good things here. There's the man knows how to shoot stuff. The man knows how to move his camera and score scene, and it looks beautiful, and there are performances that are fun, and at the end of the day, though, it's about nothing, and it rubs your face in how it's about nothing and how you shouldn't give a shit about it. And I don't. Like, I respond to that being like, fine, okay. I mean, I guess me and this film I'm watching are now at conflict in some way, and I want to check out of it, and it goes on forever. And I gotta say, the action scenes are good. I don't think any of them are great. I mean, I don't think any of them are
Oh,
exceptional. Like, some are the car thing. That's all right. It's not as good as other car things I've seen. The ending, the sort of weird blasted land war is just incomprehensible. I don't know who's on what side. I don't know what their goal is. It's full of stuff like this where just the fundamentals of storytelling betray any well shot sequence or stylish move with the cheese grater that John David
yeah.
Washington makes.
I would not include the ending and the great action sequences, but yes, the car heist is great. The opening opera house sort of like raid and that
Yes.
kitchen fight are what I'm thinking of when I talk about the great action scenes.
Give you
Um,
the kitchen fight.
and
That's
and the bungee jumping up and down the building is fun too.
it's fine. Yeah, you know, it's less than I expect from your average Bond film, I would say.
I think what helped this one for me was not seeing it in the theater. As much
Well,
as
no
I
one
feel like
did.
I wanted to, yeah, but I didn't see it for almost 2 years after it came out, and by that point I had been amply warned that it made no sense and not to expect too much out of it. And so and coming in this late at the very end of the Nolan-oscopy, that
Right.
I'd already kind of accepted in my heart that okay, me and Chris Nolan are never going to be soulmates. Like that's okay. Maybe like when he's not doing Batman, I'm not as interested in his stuff, or like they're one and dones, and that's okay too. So I went in with expectations rock bottom, and it exceeded them in the one area where uh, I really didn't expect it to. Like I had given up on him as sort of a director of coherent, exciting action sequences. I figured you had three tries at Batman. If you didn't quite figure it out there, like you're not
I
going to
mean,
do it in your time travel movie.
the opening concert scene is not a coherent action sequence. It's not,
True.
it's, I mean, you're juggling stuff in this, like oh backwards man now, like there's a thing that's reversing in time right now. This is a difficult thing to follow. Like I can't explain all of this having watched it 2 times now. I would not call this movie coherent.
No. That's right. By coherent action, I mean okay, like the kitchen fight is a straightforward coherent action scene where nobody's moving backwards in time. The
Yes, it's the
the
best scene in
Grand
the movie.
Theft Auto heist does a very coherent, great, straightforward action sequence of this car heist that's pretty unique and I enjoy. And then it starts throwing backwards stuff and runs it backwards again. And then I'm kind of like, I can take or leave that. Again, I don't think the backwards stuff adds anything really to
Mhm.
this because it makes things too incoherent. And
It's not a super cool effect, honestly. Oh, the
no, it's
camera's
not.
running backwards.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
that. It doesn't look that cool, and it doesn't introduce that novel of a challenge to. I mean, again, not in a easily coherent way of oh, this person moving backwards in time. That means that they can. I don't know. Do like I can't fill in the blank of what they can do that makes them extra dangerous while
Number
moving
5.
backwards in time.
You get this over Interstellar, don't you?
Oh yeah, those are the bigger between you and me is in Tenet and Interstellar. Um, but we can move on next. We got Inception,
Mhm.
which I had as at 7. You had at number 5.
Yeah.
Um, this is one that I maybe more so than Dunkirk even. So I think this has had a higher ceiling than Dunkirk on the first viewing, where it was
For
the
sure.
mind blowing effect of it
Yeah.
was more was greater. Uh, and once, and this is the one that's hurt the most by the tilting towards rewatchability over like originality
Mhm.
or just great achievement. Because once you get past the amazement that this works at all, I then am left with characters that I don't really want to go spend time with. Uh, Set
Yeah.
pieces that outside of the hallway fight uh, don't really stick with you that well or have that much coherent going on. And even the hallway fight is hamstrung a bit by how it's one character that we kind of cared about fighting a nameless, faceless projection of another character's subconscious that presents no direct threat to him. In that guy can't kill him if he loses the fight. You know.
Right. This is definitely the movie I would say has decreased the most in this rewatch of all Nolan for me. This is the one that moved, when I walked out of the theater on this, I was like,
Mm.
yeah, excellent, 5 stars. He nailed it. And, it's been a bit of a decline since then, I guess, just sort of like low key in the background, kind of having to reckon with it now and watch it, with eyes that are, aspiring to be a bit more critical. I was kind of like, yeah, this is actually, this moves down a bit in my rankings. And I think it's the only one that I like less than I did before this right now. I think. And that's it's still really good. And I do think it is the stuff he's playing with in Tenet actually working, that sort of get you removed from the emotional life of the character to kind of make a larger point. They are symbolic. They have meta relevance beyond what they're presented as. This stuff kind of works in Inception. It reinforces the central idea of the movie, the central theme of the that it is the collaborative creative process and how this changes an audience member's life. That stuff makes the film kind of click together in a satisfying way. And so I can kind of I don't mind that I don't care about his wife and kids plot line. Like it becomes part of the overall idea. It's movie tropes, tricks that they use to get us to care about the thing so they can talk about what they're really interested in talking about. This works great in that sense.
It
Yeah,
has that allegorical underpinning that
yeah,
puts that Tenant lacks for
yeah.
all of it.
It's about
Tenant's almost as complicated in its like sci-fi conceit and you know how hard it is that makes everything to follow, but it's not to this like coherent thematic purpose that Inception has. uh Again, what I differentiates them from for me now at home years later is that I'd just rather hang out with Washington and Pattinson in Tenet than I would DiCaprio and Tom Hardy and Elliot Page in Inception.
it's not because the characters are deeper though. I mean, if anything,
Mm,
they're more knowingly surface and flashy, I would say.
yeah, there. I mean, this is we're like 28 minutes into this recording. I think probably the first time that we mentioned the word fun, but that's an Nolan-oscopy for you. But yeah, characters are a little fun. Inception.
They're a
These,
little fun. There's some fun in it.
Tom Hardy has like 2 moments to be charming, but that's about it. These people are workaholics, and their job is pretty monstrous when you get down to it.
Yes, like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it has so many cool other things going on in it though, like the folding city. I mean, you forget how cool that was the first time, or like
but you
the
remember how it
score,
doesn't
the Zimmer
pay
score.
off.
No, it doesn't. Well, it gave ideas to other things. Yeah, it is something they're not interested in. That's for sure. You would think that would be useful later. Like they can, oh well, all right, we're in a tight spot. What if we bend the world's reality? And that
Yeah,
would have been fun,
I'm
right?
like,
Ah,
we
well.
can't bend it that far. No one's ever done that before. No one's ever gone past 38 degrees tilt. Like, could hear them like Nolan people doing that and kind of selling it. What they do pay off is the like stare to nowhere paradox thing, which has never really made sense to my brain. Anytime I've watched it, what they're even getting at there. I mean, with
Yeah, it's not the clearest film. I can't like. I mean, it would be. This is an example also of a movie where they don't really spell it out too well for you and are fine with you just getting the gist of it, and it works for me. Like that bugs me in a lot of these. In this one, I think that is satisfying enough because I think they at least know the answers. I think if I got the whiteboard out, I could figure out exactly what is going on in Inception. and I would be right.
Yeah.
It
I
feels
I
like they did
assume
the
the
work.
whiteboard makes sense on all of these. That Nolan can't like get out of bed in the morning if the whiteboard isn't balanced properly. So I
I'm
assume it's
sure.
for Tenet too. I just don't care enough about that conceit at all to actually try and parse what it is.
I
I
mean,
just want to
that's
watch
certainly
guys
part of it.
bungee jump up the side of skyscrapers and just very, very fast boats. There's just a certain one of the great pleasures of cinema is getting to see fast boats.
Go fast boats. Is that what they from
That's
Miami
one of
Vice?
the terms for
Is
it.
that-
Like one of
yeah.
the most amazing childish terms. I love. When we eventually get to Michael Mann, we'll have a whole like 20 minutes on go fast boats in Miami Vice.
Yeah.
um, but anyway, that's Inception.
Yeah.
Moving along next is we now get to Insomnia, which
Hmm. Mm.
you shocked me here. I had this at number 8. I thought that's a pretty respectable showing for Insomnia, which
It is.
most people would not even be able to like name like list if they were trying to name all of the Nolan movies. You had it all the way up at number 4.
I
And
surprised myself there. Yeah.
okay, well, explain yourself, sir.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I did a second pass at this list that I was making because I was like, I was putting Dunkirk higher. I was putting stuff higher because I was like, well, you got to give it up for the
Mhm.
technical craft, and like actually, it is a better movie than Insomnia. But the truth is, I like Insomnia. Insomnia is fun. It's a good movie. It's the kind of movie I like watching. I think Nolan kind of nails it, and I wish he did more straightforward thrillers of this type for
Mhm.
adults. This is a movie that just doesn't get done anymore. You get a lot more movies like, oddly enough, Dunkirk and Inception than you get Insomnia now. And I wish there were more of them. And I think this is an underrated entry into this sort of seemingly not too exciting subgenre. That you just sort of cop thriller, serial killer. It's
Yeah,
it's
it
good
would
though. It's
it would be an 8 episode series on Netflix if they
and
did
it
it
would be
now.
worse for that. This is perfect as a
Yes,
2 hour
I
story.
totally
Yeah,
agree.
and it's got a very good villain performance. I
It
think
does have.
Pacino's fun in it, and I love the setting. I think it's a very good script, and it has his Nolan's quirks and eccentricities sort of in an early stage, just applied to telling a regular ass movie story, and I think he does it better than most people do it. This is like I want more of these from him. This is good. It's a really good
When
movie.
you say it like that, I'm like, yeah, that is sort of what I think I'm getting at that I want from Nolan is like put these skills you have to more regular ass ends. just do just do a good cop movie, a good spy movie. That's the thing. I mean, even as much as I'm defending Tenet, my contention there is that there is an hour and change of a good spy movie there, larded up with another hour and change of useless sci-fi gobbledygook. Um,
Yes,
and this is free of that, but I don't know. You're right. They're not making a ton of these cop thrillers now theatrically, but it's not
there
the
were a
cop
lot at the
thriller I
time.
would reach for
Yeah.
if I was putting on a cop thriller tonight. If I was putting on a cop thriller, triple feature one night, I don't know if Insomnia would really be in the mix
Well,
for it.
I mean, I don't know. I think when you stack it up against the stuff that was coming out at the time, there were a lot more cop thrillers at the time. Things like Along Came the Spider. Things like that. I
Yeah, it wouldn't
Morgan
take Insomnia's
Freeman.
place.
Yeah, this has a level of kind of uh, humanity to it. Actually, I want to say that word. That it has an insightfulness into its characters. It has a craft, and he's so good at these things. And he keeps all of his little quirks and eccentricities at a minimum. I mean, this really does feel like a movie where he's like, okay, I'm going to prove I can make a Hollywood movie, and it'll still have my imprimatur on it. It will still be all the things that you expect from one of these movies, but it's gonna be a calling card, and it totally is. He gets Batman Begins off of this, so we don't have Nolan without this movie. I just wish you know he didn't disdain this sort of thing. If he would just make regular movies, I think I would like
They
them
would be
better.
great.
Yeah, and I kind of that sounds basic, and I'm about to in a few minutes I'm going to explain why his best movies star Batman. You know,
Yeah, I know. That's it. It's like
like
if you want Nolan doing regular ass Hollywood stuff, we've got a couple of Batman movies that work better than this, too.
yes, they do. They do work better than this.
But before we get to that, we got to talk about Memento,
Okay.
um, which I had at number 4. This was the one where I
Mm.
ended up giving it. I'm like, okay, as much as I was saying, like I might want rather rewatch Tenet, I can't plausibly claim that Memento is not a better film in all respects, except for rewatchability. Like, and that's
I think it's more watchable than Tenet.
well, it's definitely the type of movie that you have to see twice.
Right.
Like you're itching to see it the second time when you have seen all the twists. After that,
Mhm.
it's fallen off for me, where I'm like, like all these people suck now that I know what's going on. I don't really have like a rooting interest left anywhere when I watch it these days.
That's
Um,
true.
and it is on the shorter side, so I gave it credit for that too. Um, but it's a one of a kind movie. It's one of those things where it almost like it's the movie version of like Kleenex or Xerox becoming the term for like a whole line of products, even if it's not that thing. Uh, how it sort of like invents a word and just inserts it in English language. And now, like, there are certain things where you can say, "Oh, it's a Memento thing" or a Groundhog Day thing, where like, okay, that's an entire structure of like
Yeah.
storytelling that now by referencing one title we can like skip ahead in the conversation where I don't have to explain. Okay, so you're going backwards through time, blah blah. You know,
Hmm.
and it's an incredible achievement, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's really good. I think. Yeah. I mean, I have this on
You have
8.
it way down on your list, though.
Yeah, I have it on 8, and it's
Yeah,
just because it's. At the end of the day, I don't have too much to say about it. I don't have too many strong feelings about it at all. I think it's, yeah, it's good. And that's kind of where I end with it. I'm
yeah.
not passionate about much of anything in this, aside from kind of acknowledging that it all works and it's all good. I
Yeah.
don't have much to be like. Yeah, I mean, he pulls it off.
The whiteboard is balanced on that one.
Yeah,
Like
very
it
clean.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. And for me,
Mhm.
it pairs my mind with Inception in that I'm like, hats off, full points for execution and difficulty.
Yeah.
I just don't need to watch it a bunch of times now. Like,
It's a film I
uh,
feel I should like more.
yeah,
I mean, looking at my list here, I'm just like, well, I mean, I wish I liked the classier ones a little more, but I don't.
well,
I
that's the
like
thing.
it.
But I couldn't justify like I can't pretend Tenant's a better movie. Like
Right.
even though I might rather rewatch it. Actually, you put a gun in my head, I might pick Memento just because it's an hour shorter.
It's
Yeah,
not
but
nothing. Yeah, he's bloating these. How long do you bet Oppenheimer's going to be? I bet
oh
240.
Jesus,
240
yeah.
minimum. Yeah.
I'll take 234. I think it's. But speaking of bloated, our next one is Interstellar. Now, this is probably the biggest gap of any of our picks. I had it number 10 after
Mhm.
following, and you had it all the way up at number 3.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
now we went into this in some length in the Interstellar episode, but for me, it's one where there's just a thing that stops me from investing in this movie, and it's that the movie plays this one thing as a twist in a way that feels very phony to me. That it feels like it's making the characters uh, ignore this big thing so that it can bring it back to surprise me in the third act as an audience member, but in a way where I'm like, these characters are hyper educated and hyper focused on solving this problem, and this is like one of the only two pieces of evidence they have to apply to that problem, and it feels phony to me and false that they are not obsessing over that throughout the movie, and because of that, all of like the emotional backbone of the movie just does not cohere for me.
Well, technically, we don't know that they didn't spend years in that farmhouse just waiting for something to happen at the bookshelf off camera. with Murph growing increasingly angry and being increasingly reminded of her father's absence, while Michael Caine and a bunch of scientists poke around upstairs and find nothing. And you wouldn't
But
show that because it wouldn't be very interesting.
it's played as McConaughey is totally gobsmacked by what he finds there, the revelation. Uh, and I mean,
It's for
in
the
a way,
cheap
it's
seats.
to
Yeah.
the movie's credit, yeah, that it like what's going on there is coherent to the cheap seats. Uh, but because of that, I'm like, okay, but you guys are the scientists who are studying space-time phenomena. Your entire plan to go to this other galaxy or whatever, or solar system at least, and colonize new worlds is based on how there is this unexplained space-time phenomena that appeared that allowed you to travel, and there's only one other unexplained space-time phenomena that is like provably provided in uh, very clear, like non-coincidental intel on what was going on here, and just the fact that that's not considered a key component of the puzzle, it makes the whole thing feel like a movie that is setting up a twist to me, and that gets in the way of the big sweeping emotional stuff that the movie really hinges on.
I can appreciate that. This is just the most fun one to watch for me. I mean, a couple Batmans aside, this one is a blast. It has space. It has really winning performances with actual character arcs that make sense. It has a lot of really, really great visual elements, great sequences. The water planet, one of the best sequences in the entire filmography here. It moves. It's this movie's a lot of fun. This is the one that moved up the most for me. This is the one where during this I kind of came around to it. I was finally like, oh, I get it, because I was right there with you on this one. When this came out, I was like, yeah, it's another Nolan. It's a Nolan, and it's all right. This time watching it, only the second time I'd ever seen it, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get what's cool about this. The emotional stakes are working for me now. I like that he's really investing in those. He usually doesn't. This time he goes all in on doing Spielberg stuff. And it's sort of almost feels like, yes, I can do this if I want. I just don't want to most of the time. And then, my response to that, of course, is I would prefer if you did this more.
What's surprising me, pairing this up again with Tenet, because
Yeah.
that's the one you put Tenet at the very bottom,
Yeah.
and I put it way higher, and I put Interstellar way at the bottom, and you put it way higher. And both of them, it strikes me, have some of the same issues where there is,
latter day Nolan. Yes. Uh-huh.
yeah, and there's this stuff like the space movie in here that takes place like when they finally go through the wormhole, up until when he goes back through the other like black hole wormhole thing, and they're doing the water planet and the Matt Damon stuff. That stuff is really fun to me, but for whatever reason, that good stuff is larded down by a bunch of not so great stuff that I don't want to keep going back to the Dust Bowl on Earth.
No, I
And
don't want to do that.
yeah, and I don't really like, Michael Caine is obviously always great, but I don't know. He's not.
They're not good, gentle.
None of his scenes are
They're
good in this
dog
movie. I'm
night.
saying. But for whatever reason, the good stuff that is sprinkled throughout Tenet for me is much easier to just lift out of all the bad stuff. Whereas I can't lift it out, the good parts of Interstellar out as easily. And it seems to work the opposite way for you, that you can brush right past the Topher Grace of it all. And
yeah, I can. And I mean, I talked about this in the episode. I don't think it's a perfect film. I think it has, has some major Topher Grace problems. Things along those lines. I think that there would be just an editing fix to all that. It would just make the movie about 15 minutes shorter and a lot more focused. But that said, there's so much that does work in this movie for me, and so many characters work. It's like you kind of have to go to a Batman movie to find another Nolan film where this many of the characters land for me. And like you got Matt Damon doing good stuff. You got even Wes Bentley lands in this. It's Anne Hathaway, one of her best performances. I like a lot of the characters in this. There are too many, sure. But I mean, we didn't even talk about Tars the robot in the episode, and he's awesome. The robots are great. They're so cool, and they have complete emotional arcs as well. It's it's him doing stuff he doesn't usually do, and I think he does it very well, kind of like Insomnia in this regard. I would like it if he made more stuff that colored within the lines a bit more, because the experimental Nolan is sort of the one that I disengage from, I guess. Um, and this one is not that. This one is him
Hmm.
doing a big Hollywood movie with his sort of certain je ne sais quoi Nolan flavor that just
Yeah.
cannot be gotten rid of no matter what he does. So, he is a director that has that. He can't make a movie that isn't a Nolan movie. So, when he applies it to genre filmmaking, it tends to come up with something unique and creative that
I
stands
guess
out.
this is not that experimental of a movie.
Yeah.
Well,
There's some time stuff, but less so than his
yeah, the time
others.
stuff, but that's sort of like real physics that he's
Yeah.
bringing, or like theoretical physics or whatever. It's not the gobbledygook of Tenet, or the like pure sort of fantasy construction of Inception, um, or even just like the sort of structural gobbledygook of Dunkirk. It's
Yeah.
but it's still, it relates to time and the time dilation stuff. But again, that's not stuff he's really inventing. That is stuff he's applying to a very straightforward Steven Spielberg story. Um,
And you can see his passion for that, though. You can see, like, oh well, if I do a space movie, I can do time stuff.
I
I
get to
can,
mess with that stuff,
yeah,
yeah. But it still does move more linearly than a lot of his other movies. That you
very
would think the
much.
World War II movie, for example, would be the most straightforward one,
Hmm. It's the least.
but
Yeah.
yeah, the wormhole fuck about movie is actually moves more straightforward from A to B to C to D, and then wraps back to A a little bit at the end. Um, it's just a hang up I have on that
That'll happen.
that keeps me locked out of a lot of that movie, and what seems to work for most people in that movie. Um, let's go on. We got three movies left. Let's just
Hmm.
hold off. We'll put the Batman together,
Yeah.
and then the other one is the Prestige,
Yes.
which you had down at 7,
Yeah.
which is not quite insulting. I had it all the way up to number 2, though. This is
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is the non-Batman one that I would actually watch uh, from start to finish, all the way through, and it's got a lot of that, like sort of fuckery
Hmm.
and twisty, like movie twist bullshit going on,
Right.
but it's in this milieu where that makes total sense because it's about bullshit artists trying, sort of like their ultimate cons is trying to con another con artist, and you know there's probably it's a whole subgenre unto itself, dueling con artists. And yeah, usually that's probably that spirals out into the height of bullshit very quickly, of like you get screenwriters trying to be overly clever, and it devolves into these elaborate, you know triple quadruple blind bluffs that everything has to go just right for them to work. But in the Prestige, because of who these characters are, a lot of that stuff takes place on the stage, where they get to
Hmm.
control everything and have all the time in the world to concoct these things. It works in there, and so it feels less bullshitty, even though we then get two lightning clones,
Of
which
course.
is the height of sci-fi bullshit.
Yeah. It's a pretty good movie. There's just little things that bother me about this movie, which I go into in the episode. Things that don't land that I feel like, well, that should land. There's no reason why this can't be funnier, why this can't have some sex in it, why this, why these guys, why I favor one over the other so much, even as I don't much like Hugh Jackman in this. I just
Mhm.
do not like Bale in this film at all, which I think is a weird me thing rather than a prestige thing.
No,
Um,
I'm kind of with you
I,
that
I,
well, objectively, neither of them are good guys. I'm
I
definitely anti-Bale, even
yeah,
even after the final reveals.
I honestly think that it somehow the chemicals got mixed wrong, and that character's not supposed to be as loathsome as I find him. I don't think the movie thinks he is. I think the movie finds them to be mostly on equal levels, equal playing ground, and it takes a
Well,
very long time. And I don't even care about Jackman. You're not supposed to care about Jackman. He's an
no, I don't
asshole
care that
too.
he dies
But
at the end.
no, I don't. But
I think part of it is that the movie on the whiteboard, like they decided, okay, at the end, after we do the big reveal with Bale, and he's like, obviously we're spoiling all these things, but he's actually two people, and we find out that there's sort of like a nice one and a bad one, and the bad one goes off and dies, and the nice one gets a happier ending. Wait, do I have that backwards?
No,
I think
that's right.
anyway
That's right.
that the movie
Ish.
wants us to empathize a little bit more with at least the good Bale, but for whatever reason, that doesn't quite translate from the whiteboard to my heart. Of like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, like even the nice one was still like enabling the bad one the whole time, and we never even spent any time with them. Like,
I think if there's one thing with this movie, it is this, which is that the entire Bale character, you are at arm's length from the entire movie by design. You cannot empathize or
yeah,
understand him until the last 5 minutes. And then when you find it out, my takeaway is like, wow, what an assholes. What a pair of
yeah,
assholes this
yep.
is. And I mean, on paper, that's interesting. That's kind of cool, but it's a bit deflating. I don't know. This is
I think that's
they,
better though, like in Inception, thinking about that and
mhm.
realizing these are all a bunch of assholes. But the movie never really wants you to reckon with that. The Prestige is more okay with you realizing that these are a bunch of
Oh
assholes,
yeah,
and
you need to do that. Yeah.
yeah, like I said, it works there. Like this, almost as a heist movie, it works. Like that for me, just that twists on twists on twists in a way that usually would become wearing to me, and I would roll my eyes at. But here, just that's these guys' art. It's their passion. It's their obsession.
hmm
It's what they're destroying themselves for is trying to be the one who lands the last big twist, and that and not so that they can get away with the money or anything,
No.
but just so they can be the one who landed the last twist. And
hmm
that in this particular milieu, that works for me. So that's what I like that one a lot. You don't, I mean, obviously you think it's fine, but
Yeah, and it's actually quite good. It's just it's very impressive in many ways. It does a lot of things incredibly well. It's fun to watch. There is just some sort of undefinable thing that bothers me about it that I find irritating. And I can kind of I met going to this in the episode. Like it's the things that don't land. It's the paths not taken. What the movie could have been. But I don't know. Aside from Tenet, it's the only one that I'm just sort of like I'm irritated a little bit at this. And
okay.
I think it is really, really quite well made. Like it's if I were making the list of objectively best to worst films, that would probably be higher. But this is my personal list, and so I have it at 7.
It's
Uh,
interesting
you
to me
know,
that
yeah,
this and Tenet get your goat about
I
like,
don't
oh,
know
you're asking me to care
why.
about this. Well, for me, it's Interstellar that gets it where I'm offended by it asking me to care about these things. I'm like, nah, but do the you didn't do the work properly. And whereas the Prestige, I find, is not asking me to care about these guys on any like emotional level. Uh, and for whatever reason, Tenant I just wrote off as a failure beforehand. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
I part of me with Prestige is I just want like Bob Odenkirk and David Cross to play him. I mean it's partly just
mm,
that. I want this movie to be a lot more knowing about how goddamn silly they are. Uh, I think that would be
I
fun.
can understand that, but obviously that is the height of folly.
Yes,
Asking that of Christopher Nolan,
of course.
you
Yeah.
know. But okay, now let's wrap things
Mhm.
up with the Batman.
Yeah.
That
Uh-huh.
we both have our consensus. Both of us, number one, have the Dark Knight,
Yeah.
and we both have Begins in either 2 or 3. Um,
Okay. Well then, yes. Right.
we've
There you
talked about. I mean, for me, this was neck and neck. I
go.
switched up Begins and Prestige, and honestly, I think what I ended up knocking Begins back a little bit is it is one of the only rewatchable ones. However, there is such a clear line of demarcation where if I'm going to rewatch a Nolan Batman movie,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to be The Dark Knight. Like it's just like
Well, I'll do the 1-2
if
punch.
I'm watching two of them, it's definitely going to be Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. But if it's going to be one, like it doesn't matter if I watched Dark Knight yesterday. Like I'm still probably going to pick it over Begins.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Dark Knight's better. It
Yeah.
has it's got Heath Ledger X Factor. It has
Mm.
a more intelligent and trenchant view of the themes it's exploring. You know, whereas Batman Begins is a lot more focused on Bruce Wayne himself and what's going on with him, and that is very effective. But just the scope and the scale of Dark Knight is much bigger, and the fact that he lands it is amazing. And and it's just fun to watch. It's the funniest Nolan film. That helps. It has probably some of the best action scenes. You know, like we've talked about Tenet, we've talked
Definitely.
about Inception, but you know, are any of them as memorable as the him flipping that truck and then doing the about reverse on the wall on his bat pod? You know, like that's a
No,
classic
that's
movie. It's movie magic. It's movie magic. It's one of the greatest all time. So
yeah. I mean, it's one of the highlights of the superhero genre. You know, that sequence.
this kind of comes in right as those are really, you know, this was the same year the MCU started,
Mhm.
and still no one has topped this. Not really. No, I don't think with question. No one's made a better superhero movie since 2008. I'm comfortable
No,
with that. Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
you could make I suppose, coherent argument that I would not dismiss out of hand. I wouldn't agree with it, but I wouldn't
Sure.
just flat out call you wrong if you were like saying something like the original Avengers movie is like pure comic book to screen,
Yeah.
crowd pleaser. You know,
Hmm.
it's a PG movie because these are silly movies about people dressing up in colorful costumes and trying to punch crime to death. And it's you know the case that basically superheroes are better in a PG format than an R-rated format, which The Dark Knight is an R-rated movie, even though it's in PG-13 movies close. Um,
Yeah.
I could say okay, I understand that how you feel that way, and I accept that. I wouldn't call any other superhero movie better than The Dark Knight, however.
No.
Um,
And it's also like it's doing something that no one has really been able to replicate. No one's really done the super serious R-rated superhero movie and had it land anywhere near this well. Like, you know, there's
I mean,
been
some people might say Logan did a really good job of it.
Logan's
That's one
probably
that I
the
haven't seen since
closest.
the theater.
Yeah.
Um,
Logan's real good. It's probably the closest that anyone has come. It's not as
but I
good.
don't think it's even
Yeah.
that close.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you know, stuff like Watchmen is trying to play in this ground.
yeah,
Every Batman movie made since this is trying to do this,
the
and
Batman
yeah,
is trying to do this. Yeah,
and no one can come close. You know, it just has this has so much on its mind, and it explains itself very well. I mean, you know, this is a long movie that completely justifies its length. I want this movie to be as long as it is, and same goes with Begins, which is a little shorter. You know, these are the
you know,
right length as long films.
you said that it explains itself really well, and I think that is actually key to it too. It is a smart movie. I think Seven is this way as well, which you know the Batman is trying to bite some of Seven style as well. But I
Yeah,
think what relates Seven and the Dark Knight beyond we've highlighted before, just how they have the exact same plot on a certain level, but they're both movies that do a great job of explaining their themes in super coherent fashion, so that the cheap seats get the philosophical conflicts here and the big thematic pronouncements, and it does that in a way that doesn't feel like they're dumbing down those pronouncements
yeah.
for the cheap seats, that they're trying to boil it down to a simple sentence. It doesn't it feels like the Joker is talking to Batman in every scene, not that he's talking to the audience, trying to walk them through, you know,
Hmm.
anarchy for dummies.
Even as they are representational figures, they have
Yeah,
personal relationships with each other. Yeah,
it
it's
strikes that
great.
balance so well, and that said that it does this R-rated superhero thing in a way that we've seen now in so many fashions. Like, oof, when you get that a little wrong, it
Yeah,
can be so painful.
yep.
Like,
I mean, even the Dark Knight Rises can't come close to what this does. You know,
yeah,
it shows you all the ways this can go wrong in a sense, and yeah, I mean, look, I was hoping that we get through this and I wouldn't be here at the end being like, "Yep, his best movies are about Batman," but here we are.
yeah.
That is what I think, and it makes me feel basic in some ways. But I think the truth is, I'm just I don't I'm not a huge Nolan guy. His aesthetic and mine are not they are different, and
Me
I'm never
too, but I found it
yeah
necessary to throw in a movie about 19th century British stage musicians, so I could be like, oh, but I like non Batman stuff too.
I
I'm smart.
I mean, he's a good filmmaker. These are all good on some level, not all, but
Yeah,
most are
that's
good. And he's
that's the thing. When
yeah,
you're talking about the number seven, number eight on a
yeah,
list of somebody's movies, like that sounds like more of a dissonance. I mean, I think if I have Dark Knight Rises at 9, that's a movie I think doesn't actually work.
yeah.
After that, I think he's got 8 movies that all work. A lot of very high levels of difficulty, doing things that are fairly unique. Actually, that's not true. One of those I don't think Tenet actually works. I just think the parts of it work in spite of how it doesn't work, and the parts that don't work, I guess, are so bad that I almost find them charming. And how they,
I mean, it is in some ways Nolan's funniest movie. Uh, it's
maybe but that's also a Dark Knight thing. The Dark Knight is like what probably his funniest movie, just because the Joker is
Mhm.
an inherently humorous character, even though he's not really being played for laughs much in this movie, but you almost can't help it.
Yeah, I find a smile creeping onto my face any of his big scenes. I'm just sort of like, oh boy. Every time he shows up, even as he's being scary and jamming pencils into people's eyes and stuff, I'm still just like, scamp. It's well, I mean, I'm not saying anything by suggesting that is a miraculous performance,
Right.
and elevates the film dramatically, and the film is pretty good even without it. So yeah, I mean, there you go. It's right there. And Tom Wilkinson, same thing and Begins.
Exact same thing. Exact same caliber performance.
Yeah.
So that's it, folks.
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Knight is good. That's the final verdict of the Nolan-oscopy.
Yeah, that's where we landed. Okay. I don't know. Do you feel like, I don't know, do you have a greater appreciation for him now? Do you I mean, I was always ready going to go see any movie he made, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I don't have a greater appreciation of him. I have come to a greater understanding that, okay, you know what? We're never going to see that much eye to eye. He does remain somebody who, yeah, it's a must. Oppenheimer is a must see.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even as I think it's a coin flip whether I'm actually going to enjoy it at all or not.
Yeah, biopic is always the last thing I want to see somebody doing.
Exactly. But he does his thing that is distinctive. Nobody else does it quite like him, and he. There's also just a certain thing where, like, if you show that you've got a Dark Knight in you,
Yeah,
I'm always gonna have to see it on the chance that you have another one in you.
I mean, it seems like a lightning in a bottle thing for anybody to make that movie, but like, yeah, he could do another one, certainly possible. And I don't know what that is at this point. Like I say, I want to see him do a horror film. I want him to jump around. I want him to try every genre. I want to see him try a comedy. Straight up, just for the hell of it.
No,
A period piece would be cool. Do something like
he did The Prestige. But
I mean, like a Braveheart kind of thing.
Like, swords and sorcery.
Like something in the Middle Ages. Do something like that. That'd be fun. Then he can't do many weird tech stuff. He's got to kind of. I mean, of course he can. He can find a way.
There's a wizard, and then there might as well be a wizard in Tenet. Like, I mean, I think what I'd actually like to see him for as basic as it sounds, just straightforward thrillers, crime stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say no to that, man. Another one of those would be great fun, like a $40 million crime. Oh God, that'd be great. Yeah. That'd be so cool. I mean, he has kind of become one of those guys who is now a victim of his success. I mean, it's not a victim in, no, he's not a victim.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
Theological couching of, he's rich. I get it.
He is now obligated to make tentpole films. Every single thing he makes is an event picture. Oppenheimer is going to be an event picture. They spent like $160 million on Oppenheimer, which is a black and white film about a scientist, a real one. And so that probably isn't the right approach for that film. I mean, obviously we haven't seen it. We don't know what he's doing with it, but my guess is it's
an okay thing. Batman's a scientist.
Sure, he's not going to do Batman shit though.
No, sorry, it's a Simpsons joke.
But he's now. What was the last small film he made? I guess The Prestige is probably the last one.
I guess.
Mm-hmm. And even that's not that.
Does that count? Yeah.
I mean, but it's much smaller than everything else by a magnitude of probably $100 million. And
I don't know if I want to see him go smaller though. Like I said, I want a straightforward thriller or crime thing, but I don't necessarily that it needs to be small. I don't need him to do like Reservoir Dogs. Like he can do a Heat like scale of.
I mean, you're right. You're right. I don't mind that they look big and they're awesome to watch. I don't mind.
But I guess that's the thing you can say is that he's already done some of this stuff that you're like, I like to see him do a version of Heat, but people say that The Dark Knight is Heat with Batman, although I've never fully understood that.
Well, they wear masks in one scene, Al.
There's a bank robbery. Yeah, you know that part. But and then people talk about wanting to do a Bond movie, but Tenet is basically a Bond movie with some
Totally.
extra sci-fi gobbledygook.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of already done those things. I don't know what world is there left for him to conquer.
That's why I want to see him jump from genres. I want to see him do, the period film, the horror movie.
The horror movie is probably where it's at.
That's my number one.
Like,
That's my number one wish, is that he does a straight up creepy horror film. But I don't know. That also doesn't seem to be his vibe. So we'll see.
yeah.
It would be cool. And I don't know. I do think he's kind of in this, great director mode at this point, where
Yeah.
any film he makes is first and foremost a Christopher Nolan film. So, if he's like Kubrick, maybe he's like, well, maybe it's time I make this. Maybe it's time to make my horror film. I mean, I kind of hope he thinks about his career that way.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll be back for Oppenheimer. We have to at this point.
Oh, of course, yeah. Hey, are we film bros talking about just how great The Dark Knight and Fight Club and Tarantino movies are? Is that who we are, as it turns out?
I don't think it's even qualified as a twist. Like, yeah, that was there in the first act.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. What are we supposed to be talking about? Are we supposed to be saying how Dunkirk's the best of them? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I want to. I'm trying to be serious about this, and then I come in and just like, well, I hate when he makes complicated things. I want more. I want more cop movies and Batman, please.
I'm at a point. Look, I like complicated sometimes, but complicated does not always mean better.
I think it's a Nolan aesthetic thing for me. I kind of his version of complicated is not really my idea of a good time most of the time. But he's obviously great. He's obviously a great filmmaker. So, they're all worth seeing. So they're not following really, but the rest.
Yeah, skip following. All right. We'll be back for Oppenheimer.
Yeah. And next is Cameron. You excited?
Yeah. Never seen Piranha 2. It's going to be
I think in this case, Piranha 2 is the one that neither of us have seen. So right, I've heard nothing but awful things about it. Very exciting.
I wonder if there is any bit of him in there though that we'll be able to like, oh, there's a Cameron shot or something. Or
from what I understand, no, but we will see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Okay. Oh, and did you know Avatar is returning to the big screen in September, which is probably about when we'll get to it. So,
nah, I don't believe you.
Yeah, we'll make it. That's 2 a month or so. I don't know.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to race. All right.
Well, all right, I am going to watch that, though. I'm going to see it in theaters again and give it every chance to finally work again. Okay, cool. So that's it. Right. Thanks for listening to all these Nolan episodes.
Yeah, thanks, folks.